Well, I got the picture.
Hey everyone, this is Press Any Button and we are back with another part of our action adventure series. In today's part we're going to be continuing with our enemies, getting them to spawn into our scene and also getting them to move towards our character in a 3D space. Alright, so we'll begin by right clicking in the hierarchy. We're going to go to 3D object and we'll select a cube. Now the reason why we're choosing a cube is just for demonstration's sake. You could use any other 3D object, but a cube will do for now. I'm going to rename my cube so I remember what its purpose is, and that's going to be spawn cube, and this is essentially going to be like a button that we press to activate our enemies. So when we collide with this cube, our enemies are just going to pop into existence, which will be pretty cool. Then I'm going to go to add component at the bottom of that object, and I'm going to add a new script. In my case, I'm just going to search up the script that I've already made because I've already gone ahead and done that. But once you've got the script on the spawn cube object, you're going to open up Visual Studio so you can edit it. Alright, so here we are in Visual Studio. The script is very simple. The first thing you're going to see at the top is public game objects, and then we've got square brackets enemies. Square brackets indicates that we're creating an array. The type is the game object, which is right next to those square brackets, and because it's public we'll be able to mess around with this in the inspector, and we'll call it enemies, and that's the name of it in white there. Then we've got void on trigger, enter collider. Our switch is going to take as an argument a tag. If our tag is the main character, then we'll go into this for loop where we'll run through each iteration of our enemy game objects that we've added into the array. So it's going to start from 0 because that's how arrays start. So it would be enemy at point 0 in this array or list of enemies, and we're going to set enemy at point 0 to true, and then enemy at point 1 in the list is also going to be set to true when we go through that for loop again. Once that's done and we've iterated over all of our enemies, we're going to destroy this current game object, and then we have a break statement because we're using a switch. Alright, now let's return to Unity and see how we can set that up. In the inspector for our spawn cube where the script is, we have size, so we're going to set that to 2 because we've got 2 enemies that we want to set active, and I'm going to drag my enemies into those boxes that become available when I set that to 2. Now because we are setting our enemies to active, we're going to deactivate them in the hierarchy before the game begins, hopefully saving resources, and everything should be set up in terms of the target that they're facing towards and everything like that, because when we create prefabs and we try to add them back into the scene without assigning some of those crucial things that we deal with in the inspector, things can go wrong. So the best thing that I figure we could do right now is set them to active instead of instantiating them from fresh. So we deactivate gun enemy and we deactivate melee enemy, and then we go over to our spawn cube, set the box collider to is trigger, and let's test this out. Alright, so here I have my spawn cube. What happens if I run into it? Boom! Our enemies appear and they're kind of making me move a little bit. So let's see what's going on with that and see how we can fix that because it was a little janky. So we've got our enemy hurt script and we're going to go and edit that because that's where we're going to deal with the movement. Here we are in Visual Studio and I made a couple of changes. To begin with, we've got movement speed, which is a public float, minimum distance, again a float. We have a reference to the animator which we used last time, and we've got a constant integer which is called lockout. It's a constant because it never changes because we always need this value to be 0. So we haven't done anything different in void start, but above void update I've just added this little comment, just a summary of what this void update will do. So as it says, we're going to deal with the movement of the enemy, where they're going to look and how they're going to move towards our character. So we start with vector 3 looking. Now we've been using this all the way up till now, so this should be in your script already, but we're going to lock out a couple of axes. We're going to go looking.x equals lockout. So looking.x is going to be equal to the value of 0, which is our constant integer. That's going to be the same for the z-axis, so looking.z is going to be 0. So we're not going to look at all on those axes, which means our character will only rotate along the y-axis, which in Unity is our axis going up and down. That's our vertical axis. So we only want rotations that look like this from our character, and that's how we achieve it. With transform.rotation, we just use looking, bearing in mind that we've locked out those other axes that we don't want to look along. And then we go into this if statement, which is this vector 3 again, but it deals with distance, and it pretty much says that if the position that we're at is greater than or equal to the minimum distance that we're going to set, which is just a float right now, then the game object is going to close the gap between the target and itself. And the minimum distance will dictate how far we stop from our target object. So that could be really far away or really close, and we get to work with that in the inspector. Okay, now we've returned to Unity, we can go to the inspector for both of our game object and manipulate a few values. So our melee object, we've really done nothing in terms of these new implementations. I'm setting the minimum distance to 2. We're going to have a movement speed of 5 still, and let's see how that all plays out. And there we have it. That is our basic movement in a 3D space sorted. We've also been able to spawn in our enemies, hopefully saving on resources as this game goes, because they won't be active when we're like 1,000 miles away from them, which means that we can use our resources on these enemies exactly when we want to. We can also control how all of the fights will occur in our levels, so we can make them as dynamic and cool as we want. That's been another Press Any Button video. Hope you enjoyed. Press on, keep creating.